Hello, and welcome to the Practitioner's Corner, Whole Brain Learning by Nora White for Education 202 taught by Dr. Lori Miller. Whole brain teaching is one of the subjects we've been learning about this semester, specifically from Dr. David Seuss's book, How the Brain Learns, 5th edition. It tries to engage both sides of the brain. We've been learning that while the left brain is often very present in writing and other things, and the right brain's more engaged in creative activities, that when we're learning and we use different kinds of learning, we engage both sides of the brains. And it really helps students to learn their best and catch more information, and helps them integrate their learning into a more meaningful whole than just using one style. It also utilizes different styles of learning. So it tries to hit all of them: verbal, visual, oral, physical, logical, and social learning. And it also relies heavily on the use of things like graphic organizers to help, obviously, organize information, to help students understand the relationship between concepts. And it's a very helpful tool to use with those who have learning disabilities, and we'll touch on that a little bit more later. Lessons that engage the whole brain are highly organized and neat. Dr. Sousa says all of these neat things are really important, and that, not be flying by the seat of your pants all the time, that you are organized, you know what they're going to do, and you have it set up for the students. I liked this picture of this classroom because it shows how the stations are set up, how they have tools that they need right at the end of their desks. And overall, the visuals in the room are very clean and neat. Also, the student grouping, teachers use a lot of different ways to make that work for whole brain classrooms. Sometimes they have students grouped on ability. Sometimes they're grouped on a mixture, so that you have a mixture of abilities in each group. Sometimes it's all about behavior. And, as you get to know your students, you'll certainly learn what groups work best for you. And I've also observed teachers who maybe that group is who they have today, but later in the day, she might regroup them based on the ability, so that she has the high learners together, the medium learners together, the low learners together. Lessons that engage the whole brain are multisensory, and they really try to pull in lots of things: visual, all those different learning styles that we've already talked about. This is a professional development workshop that happened at my school this spring, where these teachers are learning on how to use some graphic organizers in their reading instruction. And as you can see from the close-up picture, that they're using Post-it notes and markers and tape and all kinds of visuals to make these really neat little interactive folders for students to use. And specifically with that group, they're working with first and second graders. I also wanted to point out that that's my lovely library in the background that our school nurse painted, and every wall in our library is just amazing. And it's a great visual treat for the kids. Lessons that engage the whole brain give students options. They can work on physical, written, and oral parts of it. And if you can, it's great if you give them those options to turn in a project, so that they don't have only one way to do it. Especially for students with learning difficulties, and maybe their writing skills aren't where they need to be, but they can verbalize great things. And while I know writing skills are very important, we always want the students to get as high as they can. A great example is my brother, who probably can't really write something out really great for you that's a nice, well-written thing. It wouldn't be horrible, but it's not great. But he can give you a verbal lesson on anything. And he's a very successful salesman who purposely found a career that requires very little writing. But this was an example of a lesson that the teacher let them use these kind of things for their end project. He had them this was the end of the unit, but they were learning about genome coding, and they had to write out a sequence of DNA. They glued it and pasted it together. He gave them folding instructions, and they made these proteins. And even though he said they didn't come out like a perfect little protein, they were still able to see how missing part of the sequence changed the shape of the protein and made it different, and gave it a different biological function, and would cause some sort of problem. And then other mutations he showed them didn't really change that much in the program. So it was really neat for them to see how it went. And they were verbally explaining it with great use. And this was in a 9th grade biology class. It wasn't honors group, so they were higher level, but still, I was impressed with the mastery they had over this particular subject. Lessons that engage the whole brain often allow for student-to-student interaction. Sometimes we call it peer-to-peer teaching. And so they're able to come in and learn from each other. This is a game that I observed recently where they're learning their place digits, or place values. So they have a dice, they're rolling it, they get ones. So the first student, say, rolls a 6, they put 6 in the ones column, they roll again and get more, they add them up, and then they take out 10 and switch those blue pieces for the yellow sticks, and that's a column of 10. They put it in their little organizer there, and the first one to get 10 of those sticks gets to trade it for that block, and they win the game. And they were able to play with that for about half an hour. And one of the neat things was that she really paired high-level and low-level students together, and while she would go around the room and check for understanding and work with them, they were able to learn from each other very well. Graphic organizers come in so many different shapes and forms. I didn't even try to attempt to show them all. You know, the KWL chart is what do I know? What do I wonder? What have I learned? There's variations on that. There's also, even in this game, this little board right here is completely a graphic organizer for the students to use. So, because they're putting their things in ones, tens, and hundreds. And it really does help students with learning difficulties. I subbed in the D-level classroom at our school for quite a while and occasionally go in and help. And they use graphic organizers constantly in manipulatives that students are placing things where they need to go. And it really helps them to have an understanding because they can't always really write down things, but they can still use a graphic organizer with manipulatives. There are whole brain teaching systems out in the world. One of the most popular is called wholebrainteaching.com, and it's really more of a classroom management system. If you ever read his book, he says that it really was a classroom management system that later on he tied to whole brain teaching, but he uses a lot of things where, there's a lot of reciting of things. There's a lot of reading things out loud. It's very interactive. It's very moving, and it does incorporate many of the strategies we've just seen. Thunderstanding is another system. It has activities for teachers and parents. And then there's one called Herman Whole Brain Thinking Systems that features a test and is a system that is used in business. And it's a way to maximize your business potential with your staff. Whole brain teaching system critics are out there. And their biggest complaint is that some of the things claimed in these teaching systems is not really based on neuroscience. They're not really doubting what Dr. Sousa said in the book about those different types of activities being helpful, but what they're complaining with some certain things the teaching systems say. Like, for instance, in a wholebrainteaching.com, they have a recitation they use a lot where the teacher may say class and the students say yes, and they have variations on that. And they claim that gets the prefrontal cortex moving and the students engaged in learning. And there's really not any science to base that particular claim up. The critics also claim that it still relies very much on rote memorization, and the chanting seems to them like brainwashing. And I noticed that it's not endorsed by Dr. Sousa as a classroom management system, and he doesn't list any of these kind of programs in his index or the resources in his book. The resources I used were How the Brain Learns, 5th edition by David Sousa, The Neuroscience of Human Relationships by Luis Colzal, and there's a great video on pbs.org where teachers tap brain science to boost learning, and it's a really balanced piece about what the teachers are doing, what the neuroscientists have to say about it, and so on. And then some of the criticisms can be found at schoolmatters.info. And you can read the criticisms that they have about these programs there. I hope you enjoyed the presentation and learned something new.